Okay. So 3, 2, 1. Welcome everyone and good morning. I'm Pascal Gerken, the past chairman of YPO 2018-2019. It's great to be here again in our Davos YPO Hub this morning. And it's an honor for me as a French-speaking Pascal to introduce another French-speaking Pascal. So Pascal Cagni has an amazing career. He spent 12 years running Apple in Europe, Middle East, India, Africa. And throughout those 12 years, you took the business of Apple from $1 billion to $40 billion of business. So this is quite an amazing achievement for Apple. And yet then you went into European investment funds and venture capital, we see for a period of time. And that was a time where Emmanuel Macron, president of France, asked you in 2017 to become the true ambassadors of investments for France, and the ambassador of France, but also making sure that all business investments and relationships for France are covering the world. Welcome to our panel.
Thank you.
The floor is yours, Pascal.
Good. So I think what we're going to do, we're going to let each of my panel member to introduce themselves. But first, I want to thank the YPO. I heard about the YPO many years ago, right? And it's an amazing organization. And I think it's your first year here in Davos. You're going to see that it's kind of a jungle, right? But it's a place where we debate about ideas. So I'm supposed to playing the role of moderators, which is not exactly what I'm used to, but I will give it a shot at it. And I think we should maybe start by the youth, right? So Antoine, to talk to us about what you do and who you are, briefly. Then we'll pass the floor to Ross. And then Michel, not only you introduce yourself, but you can kind of set the scene, because BCG being essentially one of the knowledge partners of the Davos, you should be able to really deal with this, right? Make sense, Antoine?
Thank you, Pascal. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the founder and president of Ynsect. We are based in France. As the name said, we are farming insects, and we process them into ingredients to feed animals and plants. Sustainability has been the DNA for the company from day one. This is actually a spin-off of a NGO I founded 15 years ago almost, where we were educating kids about the food sustainability, where the food comes from, where the food waste are going after the plate, and how can you improve the overall food sustainability. And we found out that Ynsect could play a great role by recycling waste and also being a super source of proteins, high quality proteins. And we found out great nutritional and health benefits. Animals are growing more, faster, same as the plants, with less antibiotics, less pesticides, less inputs, less water. So this is highly sustainable, and we started almost 10 years ago now from a small lab, and now we are building a very large factory, the largest plant in the world farming insects, a vertical farm, and we raised more than 200 million for this, with a lot of patents and etc. But sustainability is the main driver of the company.
Great. Maybe just you should add a word, right? Because for me, in my role, right, you're illustrating the French tech, and also the fact that you got the resurgence of an amazing bunch of entrepreneurs, which are able now to both call capital and try to get global. So give us about who are the partners around the table, right, that you got out there, and essentially what are your goals in the short term?
So we, with the partners, we mean the investors. So we have French investors in the clean tech area, like Demeter and BPI, the kind of French sovereign fund, supported us from the beginning and is a large investor today in the company. And then we expanded after the third round to more European funds. From UK, from Belgium, and today we have also investors in the US, in Hong Kong, in Singapore. This is highlighting the fact that we are a global company because we are addressing something that any consumer is concerned every day, at least 3 times a day, their plate, what they eat. So this is a fundamental need, and whatever your diet is, we can be vegan, flexitarian, eat a lot of meat. You will eat every day either animals or plants, and we are feeding both of them. So we are the basis of the food chain. But this is a highly capital-intensive business. This is why we needed a lot of support from France, from Europe, and beyond, in capital, but also in public funding.
Ross, you've been basically running EDS. You've been kind of the same industry, right? You are now basically doing many investments. Right. So maybe the floor is yours.
Basically, we're at Ross Perot Jr. We're in a wide range of businesses around the world. I think the core business for this panel should be our industrial business. We build across the United States big logistics centers. We build in Poland, Germany, and now we build in the UK. We currently have about 22 million square feet under construction across the US and Europe. And we have the largest technology clients are our customers. Amazon's a very large client of ours. And we're building for Amazon. And so we've seen this whole e-commerce boom and the whole last mile boom. And as you build, and as we're seeing with the e-commerce and last mile in the United States, is these buildings are now going deeper and deeper into the cities. And so it makes for very unique challenges, political challenges, logistics challenges on how do you build these buildings in core cities to give the Amazons of the world that 2-hour delivery that they're looking for in the US. And now that's starting to come in to Europe.
Good. Very interesting. Here you are, right? Senior partner at BCG. You have been basically publishing an amazing study, right, as part of the Davos forum this year. So you need a microphone.
Thank you. So I don't want to spend too much time on explaining why sustainability is important, but rather maybe lay the ground for the consequences of adding sustainability. I think at the very high level, everyone now agrees that performance cannot just be defined by economical and financial performance. We need to go beyond that and start thinking about on what domains, materiality domains, each of us, companies, corporations, have an action and start including those into the way we do business and the way we measure our results. Climate is at the center. But there's not only climate, there's also all the consequences on the environment, whether it's biodiversity, water, etc. When you redefine performance, it means that from a supply chain, it has huge consequences because historically we've been optimizing cost, quality, speed. And now we need to pay attention to the CO2 footprint. We need to pay attention to the impact on communities, the impact on biodiversity, etc. So not only corporations will have to redesign the way they do business, and it has huge consequences in the way you design your product so that you can recycle it, in the way you manufacture, where you manufacture, and in the way you process your products, etc. So it's a big transition that we're going to have, and it is important in this transition that all the parties are aligned because we're trading here short-term profit with medium-term investment to build the way we want to operate in the next 10, 15, 20 years, the new models. So investors need to be in line with that, and it starts happening. You know, you've got the TCFD, Task Force on Climate, because investors recognize that if corporations don't do that, their investment is at stake. Their investment is at stake because of the risk, short-term risk on the assets they have because of floods, because of fire, but also their investment is at risk because if the companies they invest in are not doing the transition right, long-term, these companies will disappear. So investors, companies, and us as consumers are also important because currently the sentiment is really rising in all countries about buying products that do not spoil and waste the planet. And this is starting to happen. It's not yet completely at the level where the average consumer will accept to buy a product 5 or 10% more, but it's happening. And therefore, aligning all the different stakeholders and including into that, and that could be a discussion with the panel, regulation is important. In what country you are and how it is the country is favorable to this sustainability element. In terms of the capabilities, the infrastructure, the social context, and more important, the CO2 and the regulation that are in the country so that each corporation can have an ecosystem that is sustainable, consistent. So this is a bit the context that I think is important for us to discuss.
Since we want to make this panel kind of fun and challenging, right? I would go right away on Euros, right? Actually, you're doing the exact opposite of what he's telling us to do. You're going to put a bunch of real estate in the downtown city. You're going to make sure there is tons of yet not electrical vehicles and scooters doing delivery all around the places, which is going not to help the air quality, right? You're going to basically give to the consumers something that's, as a marketeer and an Apple guy, I dreamt of, which is essentially delivering products within 2 hours. Do we really need that? And so the key question for us is that within the frame, and as long as we are conscious of the issue at stake, should we basically refrain ourselves of having these 2 hours, maybe can wait, right? And Amazon shouldn't basically offer these services.
These are all very important points. So if you look at what we do, this is what the client wants. Now, if the client doesn't want it, you'll see business start to not deliver that. But there's another side. There's carbon's one issue, but also you've got the ability. We're not going into cities. We're going into old third and fourth generation factory sites with dead factories, brownfield redevelopment. You're cleaning up the area. You're putting in modern buildings, and you're generating modern jobs. And so this is what the communities want. So you've got, if you can clean up the environment, bring in good jobs with the 2-hour delivery, that's what we're currently doing. And that is a very positive social impact to bring jobs back into the inner cities. And that's what we're doing. So that's the flip side. And then how do you deliver the product? You'll see more and more battery-operated vans. But, Amazon, Walmart, all of them are very focused on electrification of the delivery. And then you'll start to see the autonomous fleet coming. You'll start to see the drones coming that'll be electric powered. And so you'll actually have product off the roads and coming in and being delivered. So this is where the future is going to go. You've got 300 companies in the world today developing new flying vehicles. So there's a whole new revolution coming in how you deliver product. And that's what we're all going to watch and see. And we're right in the middle of all of those movements.
That's very, very interesting. But I come from an economy of the offer, right? Which means that we're dictating to the customers what he wants, right? And maybe time to times, in light of a planet which is burning, Australia is here to basically remind that to all of us every day. Shouldn't we just basically decide, or having our governments, right, handful numbers of people, defining, I hate rules as much as you do, right, but kind of a frame by which essentially we don't do that and actually help you, Antoine, right, to essentially find a different way to find substitute products with a lower carbon footprint. So tell us about how you could help the consumer, right, to basically adopt your product, and actually you're more in the B2B2 business, but change fundamentally the value chain there.
So we are working with the food chain, our customers, the feed manufacturers that sell to the fish farmer, that eventually sell to the retailer. So we are far from the consumers, but we are working also with the retailers with their specifications. How can you show maybe with the existing labels or new labels? But you don't want to have 10 labels on the packaging of your salmon eventually. So it's not so easy in the supermarket, but there are different ways with the social media indeed to raise interest on the very beginning of the food chain. This traceability, I think the consumer really want to understand it. We see in France this concern about GMOs. It was first as a direct consumption, and now people are concerned about the GMO use as animal feed. So we see more and more requests for this sustainability. So we need to be more present, do the proper communication beyond just our customers, but do a full chain marketing, we call to raise this awareness, show with real numbers. For instance, we reduced by 35% the greenhouse gas emissions on the salmon food chain. 75% less resources consumption for the shrimps because we reduce drastically mortality. So basically you do much more shrimps than what you used to do before. So the farmers save, so it's saving a lot. When shrimps are dying, you are just losing all the feed, all the inputs you had to produce to feed eventually the shrimps. So we have a lot of numbers, a lot of claims that we can support and give to our customers, and they can embed them to the final consumer too.
Very interesting. Michel, in the amazing study that we published 2 days ago, right, at the Choose France Summit in Versailles, where we gather 170 CEOs and we're actually sustainable development was at the core of what President Macron stated, right, together with digital. You basically stated that essentially we should accept a 10% increase of the price. We should essentially use pricing, possibly regulations, to disincentivize. I'm not getting this one. You should help me on this one. Stop incentivizing, right? Anyone's to basically get buying some product versus others. Is that really serious? Do you believe that it's feasible? Are we seeing that elsewhere?
So I think fundamentally the main driver of the change has to come from the demand side, from the consumers, because I attend too many discussions, in particular, with clients of ours, saying, but at the end of the day, Michel, our clients are asking for these products. So they're asking for a plastic bottle, they're asking for, different type of products that don't include the right type of element in terms of biodiversity of carbon footprint. So the question is twofold. There's one thing which is we can act and we should act because of the emergency, in particular on CO2, on regulation. This, I think, is an important element of how much regulation we want to put on this. But the more fundamental one is the change of behavior. And the change of behavior is a change of the way we eat, the way we travel, where we live, and how we move. And this fundamentally needs to happen because when it will happen, then the offer will adapt to what customers want. Now, the question about price is also an important one because currently the behavior is, as I said, if it costs 5% less, I'm going to buy the product from China independent of the carbon footprint. So if we continue not to change the behavior, we don't give a lot of incentives of actors to change. Let me give you an example. To decarbonize cement, if you're putting all the investments, and all the technologies exist today, so it's just a question of investment into you increase unit cost by 67, 80% per ton. In a market, where those actors make 4 or 5% the operating margin. So it's just mission impossible. When you take this cement, you build a house, the impact of this 80% increase is 1% on the price of the house. So we're not consistent. And we need to become consistent. And it's a question of education, and it's also a question of really rethinking and encouraging our corporations to do that. That's why I'm saying the investors have a role in terms of saying, what are you doing, with carbon in your company, and what's your plan for the next 5 years and the next 10 years? I want to see it declining, otherwise I stop investing. And it's important also as well to align the regulation so that competitively all actors have got the same incentive and playing on the same playing ground.
Good. When we come, one of the examples used in the study, right, was the iPhone. And on the iPhone, you are stating that you got in excess of, if you took the cumulative sum of all the kilometers done by the part and the sub-part, right, is the figures 800,000 kilometers. So you take your iPhone here, and the accumulated, basically, base kilometers of done by each and every part is huge. I recall the time where we're essentially producing phone in Europe. Then we went to Scotland. Then we went to East. Then we went to China. I know as a fact that today you actually illustrate that you go to look for cobalt in Africa, you go to look for copper in Peru. You basically send all of that in order to basically in Japan, in France, in UK to basically do the discrete components. You resend it back in China to do the assembling. And at that stage, you put it on a boat, essentially to distribute all other places. That's the current value chain. Is there any chance that in a way or another, right, under the pressure of essentially the stakeholder, the shareholders and the stakeholder, right, that could change? When is the time, which is actually one of the idea of President Trump, right, to basically reinsuring some of these productions on the US territory? Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's what that's part of my duty every day, right, is how I reclaim and I bring back people on the ground here in Europe somewhere. So is there a chance, and what is your view on that, Russ, right? That will happen?
We're seeing business coming out of China back to North America. And so with the new North American trade agreement, it should make North America even more attractive to bring business from Asia back over. And we've actually our largest project is called Alliance, Texas. It's 27,000 acres in size. We have 520 companies there today, and we're now moving companies from China back into the U.S., bringing manufacturing back home to the United States. So in Texas, we see it real time, and we see that growth coming in because of automation, and the American labor force is very, very productive. With automation, we can compete, and that's what you're starting to see coming back in the U.S. I think a lot of it's going to be common sense, pragmatic, and value, and I think it's up to us as entrepreneurs and YPOers that we should figure out a way to have a better product at a better price. And as soon as we the business leaders, come up with products that are cheaper and better than conventional, then you're really going to win. And I think that would be the trade-off, that we have to spend more to be environmentally sensitive is where we are today, but we should be better than that.
Better as the truth of the matter is, you're doing this because you want to bring and reduce your trade deficit, right?
Right.
That's the first.
And also, politically, it's important for American business to bring jobs home.
Yeah.
So you've got different drivers in this,
which actually may end up in what is actually serving the purpose that you were clearly stating. But and we'll see how it goes, right? The truth of the matter, the cobalt is still in Africa, and the copper is still out there in Peru. So it's about basically simplifying the value chain and rethinking about how we're going to make all of that. But
you're now seeing mining come back in Texas. And you're starting to see a lot of the rare earths within the United States. You said, how do we develop within the U.S. our rare earth so you don't have to bring it in from around the world? And as we mine in the U.S., it will have the right conditions and sustainability around the mining. And so if our regulatory environment will allow us, you'll see that activity occur back in the U.S. So that's also the trend we're watching.
So that's interesting. You said, if our regulatory activity allow us, right? So in your business, Antoine, what is the role of regulations? Is it really playing a role? Are we doing enough? No, we are all regretting that President Trump went out of the COP21, right? France tried modestly at the size of his country to really push that agenda forward. We are actually surrounded by the 125 countries, but actually they represent less. I'm learning so much from your study, right? Less than 20% of the carbon emissions, right? So is regulation really the way, and does it work in your business?
I'm not too sure. Regulation plays a huge role in food for food safety regulation. So it's more to prevent new food. So we had to go through a lot of hurdles at European level, but we managed to open this new categories of insect feed for fish, soon for poultry and pigs. So we didn't see eventually it's fine. Regulation to promote more sustainable products will be a good example. But technology, I think it's all technology is also fundamental, and maybe not only the demand. Need to change, the offer can change, as you mentioned. Maybe new mining technology can help to shorten value chains. In our case, I think today salmons are mainly farmed in Norway. The feed are manufactured in France, Germany, etc. The ingredients comes mainly from South America, fish meal, small fish catch in Peru, soy from Amazonia in Brazil. What we are doing with technology today, we are producing our ingredients. It will be north of France, these ingredients mixed with other plant-based ingredients from north of France to supply this manufacturing plant in France. And they choose France. There is this Israeli player that designed a new technology to farm onshore salmon. He is going to invest north of France, this huge salmon factory that could be the final part of the chain, and then sell to the retailers all over France. So you see, at few hundred kilometers now, all the food chain will be from the field to the final plate. So the technology could help drastically also to supply. Eventually, the salmon is not more expensive. I understood it's very similar to the existing salmons. So this is possible. Regulation could help, but technology and demand all are connected and change according to the vertical you are playing with.
Before I get to regulation, I would like to rebound to what my colleagues have just said. Look, at the high level, what is happening is very simple. We've developed our economy, I'm talking about the Western world, ignoring the cost of externalities. So we've been optimizing a cost that didn't include all the cost. And this is the way we've developed. Now, sustainability means this cost exists and it's huge. And someone has to pay for it or avoid it, okay? So yes, the cost structure will go up. And as you said, it's what corporations do well is decrease the cost. This transformation requires a huge effort from established actors. And what I like in your example, Antoine, is you see that human creativity, and the startups are here to remind us that, and this is why the ecosystem is so important, is when you put your mind to it, it works. And it works in an economical way. So this is what needs to happen now. But I would say that there is a real questioning of the existing business model in a wide range of situations. Sometimes it's huge, like if you're head of an oil and gas company, then there are a lot of questions that you will need to address. If you're more in the consumer goods space, maybe it's a bit of plastic, it's a bit of re-engineering your supply chain, and therefore, but everyone needs to rethink the way they operate. And that, the good news is if you're still profitable, you have money to do it. And it will and you need some time. The bigger the problem, you need some time to get to this. So that's one point which is important. And then regulation. I'm telling you, I'm coming from BCG, so it's the base of competitiveness, and the role of the state is always you need to be careful. But since I took the role of climate, a global climate for BCG, the urgency is so important, and it needs to happen in the next 5 years. If we don't curb the emissions in the next 5 years, the cost that we will have to bear, plus the human tragedies, is going to be huge. A world at 3 degrees, we don't want to see it. So it's urgent that we do it, and we do it now. So how do you do it? To force the system a little bit. So that's why I'm thinking that, putting a cost of carbon, and I really understand that we're not going to have it globally, but starting somewhere as rapidly as possible is forcing the action.
In your view, when you look at the map, right, of the states, what are either the companies, or actually it's a question for the panel, right? What are the companies or the states which are the most proactive on this, right? If I can talk for my own country, it's clear that after half terms for President Macron, where essentially he went through a massive set of reforms, he continued to basically rebuild the startup nation that we learned so much from either Israel or in the US, right? The theme of the next 2-3 years materialized by a set of core regulations, but positive one, will be about the sustainable development, right? This is what is stated here 2 days ago. And we've got some very strong assets, right? We've got the assets of the country we are. We've got the assets also of having a set of worldwide leaders, like the Veolia, Vinci, and few others that you can name, which are dealing with waste management, dealing with also the management of the flux, water, and energy. But when you state that, you know that the digital revolutions today has been embedded in the US through the GAFAMs. When you refer to China, you talk about the BATs, right? What are the 3, 4, 5 firms which are going to help to change the mind and actually impose to the demand a different set? Is that coming up, and where is it coming? Do you see it coming in US, Russ, right? Can you see that coming from Europe? Don't we need that too, better or as a complement to regulation?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the US markets and you look at the United States is leading the world in carbon reduction. We're number 1, the UK is number 2. I think we're 15% below our carbon footprint of 2009, something like that, and it's because of our natural gas move. Our natural gas is so competitive, it's replacing coal in the U.S. That's why the carbon footprint's going down. That's market-driven forces, and that is because of fracking. The fracking revolution has delivered the natural gas supply into the U.S. to lower the carbon footprint. So I think it's free markets, free enterprise, and entrepreneurial spirit is allowing us to do it. Now, on top of that, you have automation coming. And within the industry I work in, the logistics industry, you're seeing the autonomous truck. So now trucks are going to be able to work 7/24, and they'll be able to deliver at off-peak times, and the trucking will be much more efficient. and you'll have more trucks and convoys going across the U.S. And the trucking industry is highly motivated to go to automation because of labor cost. We're like 1 million truck drivers short now in the United States. So they're being forced to go automation, which would be more efficiency, and you'll see the electric truck coming sooner, I think, than the electric car. Because again, because of business reasons. So you're seeing the market will drive lower carbon around trucking. And then around the warehouses, the clients we all have want sustainable buildings. They want efficient buildings. They want LEED certified buildings. So the buildings themselves are using far less energy to operate. So the markets in the U.S. are forcing more efficiency from what we see. And then the consumers will have a tendency to follow.
So you're not calling essentially for a change of behavior, right? The truth of the matter is some of the battery of the trucks you're talking about, right, lithium-based, are still produced mainly in China, and they represent very often 20 to 30% of actually the cost structure of these trucks. And we know that we've got a huge concern or question mark about how we're going to recycling this battery, right?
It's a big problem.
So it's a big problem, and we're not yet solving it, right? And we need to put more resource on the criteria you talk about to really go after. But finally, you said, I'm trying to do better what I'm doing, but I don't change essentially the course of actions. You are not.
But the markets in the U.S. are allowing us to become more efficient. And this is where if you have too much regulation, wrong regulation, I think it's very difficult to write regulation that's going to impact 7.5 billion people on the planet and their behavior. You have to let the markets work, and you've got to put the incentives at the right spot. And I think that's where when it comes to climate reduction, it's a big push on natural gas. If you want a 5-year program, it's going to be natural gas to coal, and you've got to start focusing on nuclear power. That's the long term.
So to your question, are there best practices? Of course, there are best practices. Okay, so I would say the Nordics, France is a good practice, and you can find a lot of companies that are starting to put their act together in the US, in Europe, and beyond. I think that we need to recognize that the journey is a long one, and we are only starting to transform. So yes, we can argue there's today some companies and some that are in advance, but it's a marathon, and we've done the first mile. So everything is still to be built in constructing the new world that I was describing. And today, Ross, what I wanted to say is each country or each group of countries will need to put their act together in this transition the way they think they can be the most effective and the most efficient. And therefore, what you're describing is also, the next steps is very important. And as long as it's working, it's okay. And Europe will have a more regulated type of framework. China will have a more top-down type of approach, and that's okay, because what we need is just to move forward. And the important is the dynamic. So you were telling me that you were working on Texas 2035. 36, sorry. And I think that all of us should think about our corporations and our countries in 30 years or 20 years. What is our plan? What is our vision? And then define the transition that is going to be required. Because this journey has to be defined. It's going to be costly, and it's going to be painful. You've seen the strikes in France, and you see the Chile example. I mean, you see the examples everywhere, whatever you do. So right now, if we don't have this plan, and to formalize it and to explain it, I think that we will be blocked at one point in time. So I'm clearly very grateful of the way you describe what's happening in the US. We have a plan in France. We should have a plan in Europe, but each country should develop its own plan.
Side note, just for the sake of taking a break here, the Yellow Vest movement, right, started from an increase of 15 cents, right, actually less than that, of the gas cost, right? Now, obviously, it embedded a lot of that, the Brexit illustrating, right, and other movements. And I'm wondering what's going to be the life in Australia within the next year, right? Just some friends coming out there. And clearly, the conscious, right, of the demand, quote unquote, the people will be dramatically different there. Now, coming back to this, you are for us, right, Antoine, kind of one of the icon of something and the creativity that Michel was talking about, right? Do you see many of companies like yours? And when you're knocking at the door of investor like Ross, myself, and few others, are you basically welcomed? Or do we see you still as a nice attempt, the exceptions which confirm the rule, right? What is kind of the sentiment that you got?
There is a movement. As you said, we need more examples, role models. Role models in companies, in entrepreneurs, in brands. In big companies, we see in France Danone, for instance. And we see a strong movement for more sustainability under this B Corp label, which is something more holistic, not only on environment, but social ethics, etc. It's a very complex and a difficult label to get. So we are on the way to get it. And there are, I think, thousands of companies today in the world having this label. So it's showing a movement increasing. Not only on the environment, how you work with your employees and your stakeholders, etc. On the impact investing, it has been a long already topic of investment, but now we see that it's not only dedicated for specific impact funds, as in the past 10 or 20 years, nor more and more existing and large funds are adding the impact thesis in their mandate. Our first fund was a pure clean tech fund, really involved in the solar, windmills, etc. Now we have been in the last fund, ID Invest, for example, Eurazeo has invested in the company. So we see more and more very big investors adding the sustainability as a very big driver, until the private equity, as you said, the asset manager.
But are they doing it because they truly believe that the return on investment could be equal or better? Or is it not that, like in time of the Middle Age, they're buying themselves a place in a paradise, right? We called that the indulgence, right, at the time, and essentially trying to do this as a marketing program. Don't you think, Ross, that's maybe a question for you, that when the financial analysts, all of us, will look at the P&L of a company and not only look at the P, right, as a core dimensions, but that we will be forced or actually incentivized to basically look at 1-2 other key dimensions, like something which has been happened over the last 10 to 15 years in terms of corporate governance, right, is diversity. And the US, in some respect, have been leading the way there, right? You cannot yet, and my YPO friends knows that, right? You cannot yet run a company without being strongly, truly concerned about that. So is it not that we need to change the box tool that we're using? And what is your view on that? Is that possible? Or what are the next steps on that?
I think number one right now, we've been in public companies, we've had public companies, now we're private. So in the private world, you plan for the long term. And in the private world, you really have a culture of do the right thing every day. And you empower your team wherever they are in the world to go out, build a great product, but also you want to take number one, we take great care of your team. You know, great benefits, great pay, great health, and then stay close to your team, and then you empower your team to take care of the client. Then you empower your team every day to take care of their community. I mean, that is the core value of what a good business is, and if you do that long term, you will be more profitable. And if you don't do that long term, you won't be, you'll be hurt. So it's always a complete circle of how do you run your business and how do you do it right, and then you want to feel like every day you've improved society and you're making the world a better place. And so within our private companies, that's how we operate. Now, when we were public, we were the majority shareholder, and so we were able to say the same thing in the public world that we do in the private world. And we told our shareholders, and I tell the analysts every 90 days, you know, you better own us long term. Don't do us, we're not a 90-day stock. We're long-term value because we took those same values into the public world, but as a long-term, as a majority shareholder, we could do that. You go into companies without a majority shareholder, now you're on a treadmill. And it takes a very strong CEO and a very strong board not to think short-term, but to think long-term.
Great. We're approaching the end of our gathering, right? So what I would like is that each of you get me 1 or 2 minutes max on what is the message you can carry to our 29,000 partners as YPOs, and in sense of what they should really do next, right, after this brief moment together, right? So maybe Antoine, can you think about a one idea on this?
We all need to be a player in this transition. We need to be exemplar. I think without waiting for a stronger regulation. In our case, this year we included a carbon price at 30 euros. So it's quite advanced. It's not the target will be at least 40. So we are designing also a carbon emission reporting. So in a way to every minute be able to see your carbon footprint. And this is something you can plug into your ERP system, your IT system. So this is something feasible today. To them, you need to measure more. And any company can do it.
So the advice is really to raise the awareness by being much more intelligible, right?
Yes.
And that advice
know
is
what
for
you do.
a member of YPO to basically get...
You can do something. You can do things yourself without waiting for regulations, without waiting for your customers' demands. You can be exemplary, and yet there are existing tools. And the first thing is to measure yourself and measure to your peers. And see how you, even though I see Sodexo, for instance, saying they will disclose all their waste production, even though the competitors don't do it. But at some point, the competitors will do it, and all together they will go to a reduction. So I think the movement can be done also by companies.
Great. Russ?
I think for all the business men and women out there listening, this is a wonderful time to be in business. It's a wonderful time to be alive. The past 30 years, we've moved billions of people from poverty to the middle class. The last decade was the greatest decade in human history. The next decade will be even better. If we keep the optimism, keep working hard, keep the vision, and keep our freedom, every challenge out there we'll solve, we'll make it better, and we'll make the planet a better place.
That's a magnificent word of optimism, right? Michel?
So I fully agree with you too. I will just give a practical way to look at it. I think it starts by building a fact base, as you said, and measure exactly where you are on all the dimensions, so that you really understand where you are. Then thinking about both the threats and the opportunities, because there are many opportunities as well with the sustainability wave. And recognizing that the sea is rising, so the demands from the market, from your consumers, is going to increase. So build an aspiration from this fact base and start, working on your transition plan and your roadmaps to start working. So fact base, aspiration, vision, and then develop the implementation plan.
Great. Tough to close about 3 very good conclusions, right? What you can measure, you can manage, right? So that's what I'm summarizing. What I want to just say that clearly, while we've been learning a lot from the US over the past years, Europe want to be on the forefront of that. I share very much the optimism, which is yours. And I believe that we need to take the lead. We've got great leaderships across the world, but typically in Europe. And I would invite actually most of the IPO guys to basically come and challenge us in Europe so that the good old Europe, right, of Donald Rumsfeld and a few others, can basically show that when you think about looking forward, kind of our specialties, and we can help on that one. On that note, thank you to everyone, right? Pascal, it has been a great pleasure. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pascal, for leading this wonderful session and having those 2 hats. That was amazing, absolutely. Thank you all for being today with us in the YPO Hub, and we look forward to take this home and change for a better world. Thank you.
Thank you.